accusations that Governor Cuomo gave preferential access to COVID tests to his family is now part of the state's impeachment investigation.
Not only did he put them ahead of the line, state troopers that actually transported these samples, which is just a gross abuse of power.
You can never go up if you've never been down, down, down. If you've never been low.
Right there, view along the river in Nashville. Good morning, Nashville. It's 55 in your city right now. You're going for a high temperature of 70. Not far from Nashville, Tennessee is Bristol, Tennessee. And this weekend, that will be the host city for the Food City Dirt Race that you will see featured today with Ashley Strohmeyer, who is out in Tennessee. It's going to be on Fox. Good morning.
Dirt track races are always fun. I was watching Fox and Friends first this morning, and I picked up a little tidbit. I grew up watching dirt track races in rural Grayson County. Steve apparently grew up, Rachel, doing demolition derby at dirt tracks in Kansas.
I did, in Clay Center, Kansas. It was a lot of fun because I remember once I got to get behind the wheel of probably about a 1965 Chevy Impala, and I was able to drive it at full speed, which it was a junker car, so probably 12 miles an hour, and hit a couple of friends of mine in high school. And it was the most fun because you really couldn't go very fast, but it was a dirt track, and that was the key because you would just spin all over the place.
Well, I grew up playing Barbies. I can't really tell any of the stories. So, the New York Post has a cover story about the amazing press conference. 64 days it took President Joe Biden to do a press conference, and the New York Post is saying he looks glazed and confused.
Well,
take a look at some of these sound bites from the conference here.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway. We're going to get a lot done. When I was United States Senator, Vice President, am I giving you too long an answer? Because if you don't want the detail. No, but I mean, I don't know how much detail you want about immigration. Okay, where am I here? Let me see.
Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible. You got the right code for your credit card. What was your dog's name? Okay, hang on. Sorry. Oh,
man.
Yeah, it was kind of hard to watch at times. He did seem confused, no idea what he was talking about. I didn't understand what he was talking about. He rambled on until he apparently would occasionally either run out of gas or run out of words and then pause for a moment. You know, maybe he was searching for a new direction or a new word, couldn't find it, changed the subject. Ultimately, maybe he was just rusty. What was it, 65 days? He hasn't had a formal press conference, so maybe he should have done it earlier. But nonetheless, a lot of people are going, what was up with Joe yesterday?
He was also using cheat sheets, and anyone who's ever given a public speech knows you can get lost searching through your papers if you're relying on them. I want to say this. No one wants to make fun of Joe Biden or score cheap points. I think the important point is this. There were moments of clarity for Joe Biden as well. There were moments when he did fairly well during that press conference. But are you defined by your moments of clarity or are you defined by your moments of confusion? For 4 years under President Trump, it was you will be defined by your misinterpreted controversies. We're talking about the leader of the free world here in Joe Biden. And it's fair to ask, is he on his game? And when you're using cheat sheets and having moments of confusion, this is a legitimate concern and a legitimate topic to explore.
But maybe it's just all about messaging. They want to make sure that everybody in the administration is on the same page, and that's why whoever types stuff up for Joe Biden types stuff up for Joe Biden. Joe Concha was watching. I heard him immediately afterwards. He had some sharp words for the president. Joe, regarding the cheat sheet, not only did he have essentially an outline of different programs, that one right there, I think it's about infrastructure, but he also had essentially a great big Facebook page that had faces of White House correspondents and some of them were actually circled, and one of them that I can see on the far left actually had like a, okay, there's a number 9 next to it. So he had trouble figuring out where he was, what he was going to do next when it came to proceeding to the reporters. It looks like it was all choreographed by whoever choreographed stuff for him.
To politics, new to Washington. How would he know who these reporters are without... Okay, it's Sarcastic Friday. Sorry about that. But yeah, you would think by now he would know who the Associated Press reporter is, or who the PBS reporter is, or who the NBC reporter is. He didn't seem to know who the Fox reporter was because he didn't call on Peter Doocy.
No, he knows who he is.
Oh, absolutely. But his handlers decided that of the 10 reporters that he would call on, he wouldn't call on the highest-rated network and cable. So, you know, that makes a lot of sense, right? Unless you're actually afraid of the question, which appeared to be the case. But what I wonder here is what actual news came out of this press conference? When you think about it, okay, the big headline, I guess, is that a sitting president said that he would run for re-election, which is something that all presidents do, right? When was the last one that didn't run for re-election? I think it was, LBJ, right? You got to go all the way back to the 60s. But on the border and on taxes and on spending and on foreign policy, particularly as it pertains to China, we didn't get any specifics. On the border, we got no solutions in terms of that. Remember, the president, he appointed Vice President Harris to handle the border, to fix that crisis. This is the same vice president that, as a candidate, when she was running for president, compared ICE to the KKK, said that border crossing should be decriminalized. And this is the person that you're putting in charge of this? That would have been a nice question to ask.
Joe?
Or, you know, as a parent, go ahead. Let me just one more little thing here. As a parent, what people I talk to most talk about is reopening schools fully and in person. And here you had a president that talked about listening to the doctors and the science and following the data. Yet, still, reopening schools is a big problem because he won't stand up to the teachers union. So, Mr. President, you just passed this COVID-19 bill where billions are being spent to reopen schools, yet most of that money isn't going to be spent until 2022 when the pandemic is likely over. What do you say to parents that want to reopen now? Those sort of questions were not asked, guys.
Well, I thought a very telling, and it made news, question and answer was the fact that Joe Biden revealed that he thinks the filibuster is racist, essentially. So was it racist last year when the Democrats filibustered against Tim Scott's, judicial reform crime bill? Was it racist back in, I think it was 2005, when Joe Biden joined the filibuster against Sam Alito? So when exactly did it start being racist?
That is a good question to ask, right? So you could bring up the fact that Barack Obama did say that it was a Jim Crow relic, but then you have to read back Mr. Biden's words, the way that Tim Russert used to do so well. Mr. Biden, in 2005, you said that this was something that you were most passionate about in terms of defending the filibuster. Read back the quote and say, okay, are you that person or are you now this person? And why the change? How did you evolve on the issue, which is a big word in Washington? Yeah, that would have been nice to do for a press corps that's been doing this for a while. But instead, we got not even softballs, but mostly grapefruits that were tossed to the president yesterday, with the exception of Kristen Welker, who actually pressed him on opening the press or allowing the press to see migrant facilities, and then asking him in a follow-up, when will that happen? And he said, I don't know. And also,
he's the president.
Curiously said,
I
won't do it until... Yeah, I won't do it until my plan is implemented. In other words, until I really clean up everything and make it look nice, I can't let you in to see my apartment type of situation.
Actually, we have a clip that you just mentioned that. Let's just take a look at that clip. We'll come out on the other side.
Okay.
Will you commit to allowing journalists to have access to the facilities that are overcrowded moving forward?
I will commit when my plan very shortly is underway to let you have access to not just them, but to other facilities as well.
We haven't seen the facilities in which children are packed together to really give the American people a chance to see that. Will you commit to transparency on this issue?
I will commit to transparency. And as soon as I am in a position to be able to implement what we're doing right now.
Just to be clear, how soon will that be, Mr. President?
I don't know, to be clear.
actually kind of honest. I don't know. He doesn't know how long it's going to take to clean up the facility so they can let the press in and it not look so bad. I thought you brought up a great point, Joe, about the schools, because there were lots of things that weren't talked about. The XL pipeline, jobs, businesses reopening, but the school opening was a really important one. Chuck Todd said there were no questions on COVID because there's nothing negative to report. That's what Chuck Todd said. And I kept thinking, ask the parents. I mean, it was shocking to me. But I think what all of this tells me, the things that weren't talked about and the fact that so much was on the border, which they created this crisis, is that this administration is much more focused on creating new voters than they are in taking care of current American citizens.
That's interesting, because how do you create a new voter, right? Well, maybe if a migrant comes to this country, then you spend, what, $86 million to put them up in hotel rooms for months. We're talking about $70,000 per migrant. What do you say, Mr. President, to all those homeless people currently in, say, California, for instance, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco? Are you going to give them $70,000 as well to live in a hotel while you try to figure out a problem? These are very easy things to ask. And again, the tone of this press conference, where there were times where Joe Biden was speaking for minutes on end, and those interruptions that were so familiar over the Trump administration and over his press conferences suddenly went away. They allowed this president to, ironically filibuster his way through a press conference at times. And again, the optics, the fact that the leader of the free world needs to look down at not just like a note card with maybe a theme, just a bullet point here and there, but notes that they look like cliff notes, and he was reading from them directly at times. That does not reflect well to our adversaries in China and Russia and Iran, the folks that were watching this and saying, okay, who are we really dealing with right now? Oh, we're dealing with somebody who needs to have his answers written out for him at times. And it was a very uncomfortable thing to watch yesterday, guys.
Hey, Joe, I appreciate what you said about the lack of substance. When it comes to anything related to important policies this country is facing, crises this country is facing. But back to that moment again on whether or not there will be transparency at the border. I thought that was very, not just newsworthy, but news-making. To have the President of the United States say, we will not have transparency essentially until I'm ready for it. You can look at my house, but not till I get it in order, is quite a statement for the President to say when it comes to press freedom. But, Joe, our colleagues in the media took all this into account, digested all of it, and thought, bravo, beautiful performance by President Biden. Watch this.
The biggest news arguably was in his opening statement. Quite a contrast to the previous president, who always wanted to be the center of attention.
There is a sense of humanity that he is talking about here, saying this is who we are. This is the America that we are. We're not going to turn these kids away.
Yeah, he did not turn back when asked about being a good guy. The decency of this presidency and the American people, he said he embraces.
We weren't talking about, and that was his response to the pandemic. And that's because the entire time he's been in office, he has been messaging.
There wasn't a single question on it, which tells you what other thing. There's clearly not any negative questions to ask. COVID's going well right now for him.
There's that moment you referenced right there, Rachel. So, I mean, Joe, come on now. A+, rave reviews.
Yeah, this is like the WWE, you're a former ESPN guy, of punditry, Will, right? Where it was basically decided beforehand that people were going to praise this press conference because the expectations were set so low. And again, you talked about before, like, what was newsworthy. And yes, him not knowing when migrant facilities will be able to be toured, that is newsworthy. I think I meant more like what solutions, actual solutions, did he offer up in terms of, I am going to do X and Y and Z. Instead, that punditry that you just saw was all based on emotion, what President Biden, I guess, projected to the country in terms of him being the consoler in chief. But Yamiche Alcindor kind of set the tone for this, right? In her one or two questions, I should say, she made the argument that the surge at the border was only happening because President Biden was, quote, a moral and decent man. unquote. Her words, right? But then you talk to the president of Mexico who says, oh, no. It's because candidate Biden said literally to surge the border when he was a candidate. Or you talk to migrants themselves in interviews that say, yes, it was President Biden, then candidate Biden's words that emboldened us to come to the border. So that's the funny part. When you talk to people on the ground, even Texas Democrats or folks in border states like Arizona, they'll say things that are a lot different than the president was saying yesterday. But here you saw pundits yesterday on television, reporters actually taking everything that the president said hook, line, and sinker in terms of being a moral, decent man instead of a person that solves problems. And right now we have a big problem at the border and in many other areas as well.
Joe,
in this country, I didn't get any solutions there, Rachel.
He didn't know basic facts. He kept saying, you know, he didn't understand that there's the big seasonal wave comes in May. Duh, he doesn't realize that the desert's really cold right now, this is actually a low season, and that as you move into May, that's the high season. He was saying, no, now is the high season. I mean, how do you make policy on the border and you don't know basic facts about migration?
Or you're purposely misleading people, right? I mean, it's one or the other. When he said that Republican lawmakers don't support me, but Republican voters do, I'm sorry. I don't know what Republican supporters are supporting the president on at this point. And I look at Gallup that has him at 10% support among GOP voters. So when he was asked about unity, he said, well, what I mean by unity is that Republican voters support me and Democratic supporters support me. So therefore, that's what I'm going to go ahead with in terms of perhaps nuking the filibuster and just pushing everything forward on an infrastructure bill, for instance, that has very little to do with infrastructure, but does have everything to do with free college and paid family leave and equity. So that's what we're talking about here. But again, his basis of his foundation, in fact, is Republican support me, yet 10% do in Gallup or mostly every other poll. It made no sense, quite frankly, but no one pressed him on it, guys.
Well, you know what, Joe? He might have had a little note in his pocket that said Republicans love him. The big question is, who's typing all this stuff out for the president so that he is saying it out loud? He also said that a vast majority of the families at our southern border are being turned away, and yet the actual number is, according to Axios, 13